Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Johanna. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong's daily COVID tally continues to drop, but the death numbers keep rising. Beijing tells Hong Kong it will provide whatever the city needs to fight COVID. And a weak ceasefire for 2 cities in Ukraine crumbles as the Russian president doubles down. Hong Kong saw COVID numbers go down for a 3rd day in a row, but health authorities continue to insist it's not time to relax yet. Isaac Lee reports.
Hong Kong logged 31,008 COVID cases today, almost 20% less than yesterday's figure. All but 2 were local transmissions. But the Centre for Health Protection believes an avalanche of cases identified through rapid antigen tests have yet to be reported. They added that the online system designated for uploading positive self-test results has entered its testing stage, but stopped short of saying when it will be put into use. Despite the decreasing number of cases, the death toll went up. Another 153 patients succumbed to COVID yesterday, 114 of whom were not vaccinated. Only 13 of them were aged below 65, with 6 of them suffering from chronic diseases. 4 others, aged 56 to 89, died last month before being admitted to hospital. This brings the death tally in the 5th wave so far to nearly 1,800. With public hospitals at full capacity, the hospital authority has reviewed plans to transfer some COVID patients to their private counterparts.
We've been under exploration with some private hospital, and especially I talk about the CU HK Medical Center, and actually we are at the very last bit of the negotiations, and I think that can be start operation very soon.
Meanwhile, outbreaks have emerged in 94 more care homes. This means over 83% of the city's elderly care homes have now seen clusters. More than 16,000 residents and workers have been infected. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
With citywide mass testing in the pipeline, officials have once again assured Hong Kongers that food supply and the financial markets will not be affected. Meanwhile, the Labour chief has warned once again that employers face punishment if they kick COVID-infected domestic helpers out of their homes. Isaac Lee has the story.
While many businesses in the retail sector are struggling under the current restrictive COVID measures, the tills at supermarkets, meanwhile, are ringing. It came after a round of panic buying ensued as rumors flew surrounding the details of an upcoming mass testing program. In an attempt to ease public worries, Chief Secretary John Lee wrote on his blog today. He assured the government will secure a steady supply of food and daily necessities during the screening process. Apart from basic needs, some are also concerned about how the aggressive operation will affect the finance sector. Financial Secretary Paul Chan reiterated today that financial markets will remain open during that period. Authorities have already come up with plans to deal with different scenarios. If people cannot get around freely, the whole financial system will adopt a mixed mode. That means only 10 to 20% of the sector's workforce will continue heading to their offices to maintain normal operations of major institutions and transactional platforms. The rest will likely work from home. Meanwhile, Labour Chief Law Chi Kwong said he noticed fewer foreign domestic helpers have been gathering on the streets during the weekends after officers began strictly enforcing the new social distancing measures. Last month, 51 penalty tickets were handed out to helpers who breached the rules. He also noted widespread media reports on maids being mistreated or unreasonably laid off during the latest outbreak. He warned once again that employers face penalties and may be banned from hiring again if they dismiss helpers who test positive for COVID. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
The Shui slaughterhouse could resume fresh pork and beef supply as early as next Tuesday. The prediction came from Pork Trading Association leader Hui Wai Kin on a radio program. He added that about 70% of staff from Shui slaughterhouse had recovered from COVID and can return to work soon. He hopes to resume transport of pork tomorrow so that all operations at the abattoir can restart by midnight on Tuesday. That way, both fresh beef and pork supply can return to normal levels. Mainland authorities today reported the highest daily caseload since December, after dozens of infections were detected among students in Qingdao. Meanwhile, George Gao of China's Disease Control Agency said it's still too early to say whether the pandemic will end by later this year. Chloe Feng reports.
After a relatively low COVID caseload in the past weeks, the mainland today reported a new outbreak in the eastern port province of Shandong. This pushed the nation's daily number to a new high this year. The 88-case outbreak detected yesterday was mainly from middle school students in Laishi County in capital city Qingdao, which has a population of over 9 million people. The city, which just completed a round of mass screening, will soon conduct another one tomorrow. Authorities said all cases are of the Omicron variant, with most showing mild symptoms, and risks of further spreading is low. In total, the mainland saw 175 locally transmitted cases yesterday, a jump from only 61 on Friday. There were also another 66 imported cases from Hong Kong. This latest development comes amid debate over whether Beijing will maintain its stringent approach towards COVID. China remains one of the few countries left in the world still trying to chase the virus from its borders. Discussions heated up, especially after Chinese top scientist Zheng Guang wrote on his Weibo that China's dynamic zero policy will only be applied for certain times and will not remain unchanged. Beijing will show its Chinese way of coexistence with COVID in the right time, said Deng. However, the post was later deleted.
传播力增强，但是致病力在减。
Meanwhile, George Gao from the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention said while Omicron is less fatal, the death rate is still not as low as the flu. He added that it's too early to say if the pandemic will end by the upcoming winter. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Chinese Vice Premier Han Zheng pledged this morning that Beijing will provide whatever supplies Hong Kong needs to fight against the ongoing outbreak. It came after a meeting with Hong Kong delegates to the country's CPPCC National Committee, the country's top advisory body. Here's Chloe Feng again.
Movers and shakers in Beijing entered their third day of two sessions, the country's two most important annual political conferences. Chinese Vice Premier Han Zheng, who oversees the city's affairs, met with Hong Kong delegates from the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which opened Friday afternoon. The meeting took place this morning at the National Political Consultative Hall in Beijing. Meeting the press afterwards, the Hong Kong representative said Han pledged central authorities would give their full support to the SAR to fight against the ongoing fifth wave. Whatever Hong Kong needs, Beijing will provide, said Hong Kong's CPPCC member Jonathan Choi. That includes supplies, daily necessities, and medical equipment. Choi added that the central government considers anti-epidemic work a top priority, but the SAR government should shoulder the main responsibility. Another delegate, Johnny Ng, revealed Han expressed full confidence for one country, two systems, and reassured that the Hong Kongers ruling Hong Kong principle will not change. Jeffrey Lam added that Han agreed that the chief executive election should be postponed due to the pandemic. But according to sources, Han also had questions for Hong Kong, namely the private hospital sector. He apparently asked whether these clinics were refusing to take in COVID patients, and that saving life is a doctor's responsibility whether he works in a private or public institution. Han's speech this morning also touched on solving the city's housing problem, the city's youth, strengthening Hong Kong's position as a financial hub, and integration with national development plans. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
Russia and Ukraine are pointing fingers at one another after an agreed safety corridor to evacuate civilians from two cities failed. This comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin refused to back down amid mounting sanctions from the West. All this as the war enters its 11th day. Winna Wang reports.
Large plumes of dark smoke from shelling added to the gray skies of Mariupol. This was what greeted residents of the southeastern Ukrainian coastal city. Hope has been snatched away from people living here and Volnovakha. Russia had previously agreed to a ceasefire to allow residents from both cities to leave through humanitarian corridors into South Ukraine. But that all soon came crumbling down. According to Mariupol Mayor Vadim Bochenko, a coach carrying civilians was attacked less than half an hour after the agreed commencement time. Moscow later confirmed it had resumed its offensive, blaming the unwillingness of the Ukrainian side to influence nationalists or extend the ceasefire. The city is a key location for Russians to cut Ukraine from the Black Sea. As troops continue to close in, residents are experiencing power, water, and heater cuts. Elsewhere, Moscow's main goal of overtaking Kyiv is still going strong. Many cities in the capital's perimeter and the Antonov airport to its west are either under siege or already captured. Shelling also went on in eastern Kharkiv and Sumy. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian forces seem to be advancing south towards another nuclear power plant and appears to have plans to seize a third facility. All this went down as Russian President Vladimir Putin remains defiant under mounting international pressure. He doubled down by warning sanctions on his country or declaring a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be seen as intervention. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken briefly crossed into the country from Poland yesterday, where he met with the foreign minister.
The entire world stands with Ukraine, just as I'm standing here in Ukraine with my friend, my colleague, Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine. There's a very, very strong tide in support of Ukraine and against the horrific aggression committed by Russia. Putin's made a terrible, terrible, terrible mistake in many ways.
Ukraine will win this war anyway, because this is the people's war for their land, and we defend the right cause. The question is the price of our victory. And if our partners continue to take bold, systemic decisions to step up economic and political pressure on Ukraine, if they continue to provide us with necessary weapons, the price will be lower.
Joining other governments and private companies, credit card giants Visa and MasterCard have suspended operations in Russia. It's another blow to the country's increasingly isolated financial sector. Winna Wang, HKIBC.
The United States is pressing China to denounce Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. The message was relayed in a phone call between U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Foreign Minister Wang Yi yesterday. Blinken called Moscow's actions unprovoked and unjustified. He told Wang the world is watching to see who stands up for freedom, self-determination, and sovereignty. The Chinese side, meanwhile, urged all sides to continue engaging in dialogue. Wang also cautioned against adding fuel to the flames. On to the weather now. It will be mainly cloudy with a few rain patches in the morning tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 17 and 23 degrees. The mercury will drop briefly after the weekend before it gets warmer again. And that's our main news for Sunday night. Join us for more news at 10. I'm Johanna Chan. Thanks for watching. Good night.